Minister's speech yesterday that gave me any confidence that John Key, the National Government, the Māori Party supporters or ACT have any plan whatsoever for the future, no plan to create jobs and no plan to ease the cost of living. In fact, in the time that it took for Joe Goodhue to finish her speech, the National Government has borrowed an extra $300,000. They are borrowing $30,000 a minute. They are borrowing $500 a second, all to pay for the tax cuts that this country can't afford. Mr. Speaker, we heard Joe Goodhue say, "What's wrong with enrolled nurses working alongside registered nurses?" Well, why don't we just have volunteer nurses like the National Party expect us to have volunteers in early childhood centres? Why don't we have volunteers? Why don't we all just go up to the local hospital and start administering injections? Let's start dishing out pills. Let's start doing all that sort of stuff. And that is the stupidest idea that I've ever heard in this House, to say what's wrong with having enrolled nurses, volunteer nurses going up and taking and administering medicine. And also I heard in John Key's speech he wants to help solve social problems and improve the prospects of the next generation. Well, I say to John Key, how on earth does he expect to improve the prospects of the next generation when he's cutting hundreds of millions of dollars from early childhood education? And to have Anne Tolley sit here in the House tonight and say that that is not happening is a disgrace. Anne Tolley needs to crawl out of the cave that she's been hiding in and come up north with me to Kaitaia and go and visit the early childhood centres that I visited last week on the 1st of February when their funding cuts kicked in, and hear from the people themselves on the ground that the funding cuts are in fact hurting them. There's one early child's education centre up in the far north that is losing $160,000 a year. $160,000 is being taken from the kids of this particular early childhood centre up in Kaitaia. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about Taitokoro here. We're talking about Northland, one of the most socio-economically deprived areas in New Zealand, and the government thinks that they can cut $160,000 from this early childhood centre. So what's going to happen? Because that early childhood education centre has two choices. I heard the Minister Anne Tolley talking today about choices. Yeah, this early childhood centre has two choices. One, they can reduce the education options that they're offering the kids there. Now, how does that, I ask Mr. Key, improve the prospects of the next generation if they're actually going to take away the education options that those kids may have? The second option, let's just charge the parents. Let's charge the parents to make up the shortfall in the funding. So these parents in one of the most socio-economically deprived areas in New Zealand can just pay an extra $20 or $40 a week to have their kids go to early childhood education. So those parents, they too have choices. They can choose to send their child or pay to have their child attend an early childhood education, or they could just choose to not feed their kids that week, because these are the choices that parents are being forced to make. Food, shelter, clothing over early childhood education. And here we have the Prime Minister saying in his speech that he wants to improve the prospects of the next generation. Mr. Speaker, this is just ridiculous. The research is adamant that if we give children the best start in the years from birth through to 6, then we're going to see improved outcomes throughout their life at 10 years of age, 12 years of age, 16 years, through until adult life. But what they are doing is cutting the support. And they sit there and they defend cuts to the kids, the most vulnerable sector of our society, the little kids in early childhood education. And then, Mr. Speaker, we have the Prime Minister mincing up to the marae at Waitangi on the weekend, mincing up there and telling Māori that they have to set aside grievance and take hold of education. And I tell you, I actually have those are the exact sentiments that I hold, that we as Māori need to set aside grievance and to focus on education. In my maiden speech here, I said that we can achieve more with one generation of fully educated Māori than we will from another 171 years of grievance. And I still hold to that, and I'm glad to see that the Prime Minister supports my sentiments. The problem is we have seen this government actually entrench grievance. We saw no better example than today at the Māori Affairs Select Committee when the Marine and Coastal Area Bill was rushed through the Select Committee process with indecent haste, with a full disregard for democracy. And what they're saying to Māori, who absolutely loathe this bill that they're pushing through, they're saying, we don't care about your submissions, we don't care about your thoughts and opinions on the Māori Affairs and the Marine and Coastal Area Bill. We're just saying, stuff you, but please don't be angry with us. And there's another example, just the way they've ignored Māori opinions on the exploration rights and the issuing of exploration permits for oil exploration off the west coast of Northland. There's 100,000 square kilometres of seabed there that exploration rights permits have been issued for. There's 150,000 square kilometres of seabed off the northwestern coast tip of Northland. There's the Raukomara Basin, tens of thousands of square kilometres there, and Māori have had no say in it. No, the government has absolutely said, we don't care that you have opinions and have interest in the seabed, we're just telling you to get stuffed, but please don't be angry with us. But the worst grievance that has been perpetuated on the Māori people is that our parents cannot afford food, cannot afford to pay the rent, to pay the mortgage, cannot afford to clothe their kids because the cost of living is rising so much. That is the real grievance that's really affecting Māori people these days, so it's a bit rich for the Prime Minister to mince on up to Waitangi there and tell us, don't have any, put his grievances aside. And then he says, oh, look, take hold of education. Well, what has the national government actually offered in terms of education for Māori? They've offered the national standards. Now, the national standards are not going to make a single iota of difference, and it was Bill English who proved it towards the end of last year in this House when he said that over the next 10 years that the biggest government department is going to be corrections. And I say to you, if national standards are actually going to make an iota of difference, if they're going to address the 1 in 5, if they're going to address the 1 in 5 children who are leaving school without a qualification, that means those children will go on to higher education. That means those kids will get better jobs and will have better social outcomes. We'll be locking up less kids if national standards are going to make a difference. But instead, this national government, Bill English, has stood here in this House and he said that corrections over the next 10 years is going to be the biggest government department. Bill English has just proven that national standards are a waste of time. He has no confidence in them, and this is just another joke perpetuated on the people of New Zealand by the national government. They've also said that John Key also said New Zealand needs to build up the pool of Kiwi-owned savings and investment. Yeah, that's really good, but what happens for all those Māori parents who are struggling to put food on the table, to pay the rent, they're struggling to make the choice between early childhood education and buying food for their kids? This is an absolute joke when Māori are struggling with everyday bills, with just buying groceries, and Bill English is saying, and John Key is saying that Māori and New Zealanders need to save. It is an absolute joke. And then, of course, he goes on to say that they want to address the drivers of crime. Well, let me tell you the drivers of crime. Poverty. Poverty first, poverty second, poverty third. If they want to address the drivers of crime, they need to do something about addressing poverty. They need to create jobs. They need to come up with their plan that's actually going to make a difference for New Zealanders who are out there on Struggle Street, who are having a hard time just making ends meet. Kia ora.